Greetings, everyone. I have today an amazing guest that we love, Nathaniel Gillis, and we are doing part two because there's just so much to get into. And Nathaniel, I want you to give an introduction to tell people a little bit more about who you are and actually what you're working on, which is really, I can't wait.
Thank you. For those who don't already know, my name is Nathaniel Gillis. I'm an author, lecturer, and researcher. My work is centered around what I call the self-replication of species, or a novel field, necronetics, the uh, the the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception, which again, self-replication of a species. So my theory is that what we're dealing with, at least in terms of the entities or practitioners or species thereof, that it has hacked the afterlife and has mastered the ability to project their consciousness to the point of fragmentation, where they can possess many avatars, but be the proto-intelligence itself. My book is The Skin That Crawls, and I will be introducing not just necronetics, but also preternatural epiphenomenal philosophy, which is the difference between the proto-intelligence itself and the archetypes it's incarnating as. There's a contrast there that we'll get into here in a bit, and that's what I research. I'm not a very complicated individual. I like football. I like a cigar every now and then, and I love the research that we're doing, and so that's really who I am and what I'm all about.
So, the description and what you've called the two different kinds of
Mhm.
phenomenon, I mean, call it phenomenon, right? Can you get into that a little bit more and break it down so that everybody can see exactly the differences?
Absolutely. So early on in my research, I noticed that there was a pathology being presented in the cases, specifically incubi literature, where the entity that was manifesting to the victim would almost hack into their consciousness and figure out which image it wanted to manifest as. And so early on, I just thought that was kind of David Jacobs' hypothesis, where they're hacking into the optic nerve, and they're bypassing all this stuff. And I don't think that's what's going on. I think that is easily misunderstood because they are looking into our eyes at times. But there has always been a difference between the pathology of the entity and the pathology of the person it's wanting to manifest as. And so we've seen that in incubi literature in many cases, wherein the phenomenon or the entity manifests as a deceased husband, a boyfriend. And so where the boyfriend would not carve sigils into them, the entity did. And so in between the manifestation, what I call these interface events, I'm interfacing with the phenomenon and I'm placing rules on the archetype. And then at the very end of the interfacing event, the phenomenon does something to me that doesn't fit the blueprint of the archetype it's possessing. And so my theory is that it is, I mean, we're getting deep right off the bat here. My theory is that the reason it's seeking to be seen by us is because it's weaponizing the observer effect in order to archetype, or literally orchestrate, the archetype it's manifesting as. Who do you want me to be in this situation?
Mhm. And why do you think it's doing that?
Mhm. So I think that in order to be present with us but absent from us, the phenomenon has to be half seen.
Okay.
And
And
so it diversifies itself in our presence. Now, what's doing, in at least my perspective, is that within what's called quantum mechanics and the double slit experiment, science has proven that the phenomenon changes once we observe it. Literally, once we make eye contact with it, we collapse all the waves and we construct, thereby changing the phenomenon itself. This just gets very deep, but early on in my research, I kept pushing up against people like Grant Cameron and his theory. And I'm not attacking him right now, I'm just dealing with his theory on, well, we're manifesting the phenomenon itself. And if you're a negative person, the phenomenon is going to react negatively. I don't think that's the case. I think what the phenomenon is doing is seeking to be seen. And then by the weaponizing the observation effect, this is what it does is it uses us to incarnate the archetype it manifests.
And why do you think it needs to be seen?
I think that between the manifestation and the incarnation, we are triggering it
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
by witnessing it. And what do I mean by this is that in order to do what it wants to do with us, it has to hide behind these archetypes,
mm-hmm,
hoping that we don't realize that they're writing into people with sigils. And this gets back to the difference between even with Skywatcher and the CE5 movement, where they're discovering that what they're witnessing with their eyes is not what they're capturing on camera.
mm-hmm.
So the phenomenon is diversifying itself. And the way it's doing that is by seeking to be seen. It's deep.
Yeah.
But my point, at least trying to break some of the stuff down, is, I don't know if I talked about this in our last interview, but when I encountered a succubus long, long time ago, I thought it was my fiance at the time, and there was a reason for that. It was doing things like it was, like if you turn the lights off with like my ex, if we put her in a room, turn all the lights off, that's what this entity looked like. And so for the longest time, I thought, okay, it's just scrolling through archetypes of my mind and images, plucking one out and saying, okay, I'm going to wear this in your presence. And so what I'm realizing is that no, that the phenomenon seeks to incarnate by seeking to be witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the whole purpose of the CE5 effect is where
And
it's drawing people to observe it, and then once they observe it, it creates the archetype.
mm-hmm,
This explains the entire methodology, at least from my perspective, as to why it appears as Dear Aunt Edna, but it's not doing Dear Aunt Edna things. So we're seeing a phenomenon that's half seen and half experienced. And then in the wake of its intelligence, in the wake of the interface, that's when we realize what it actually did to us.
mm-hmm, right. And throughout history, let's just say throughout different types of civilizations,
Mhm.
what we see are different types of archetypes.
There we go. Now, let's get even deeper if we can. So, for like the last decade, I kept mulling over just singular cases, one of which was Dr. Carla Turner's, where she was dealing with a group of experiencers who were on a highway and this UAP manifested above them. Now, I say that with intention. There's a difference here, at least in the phenomenology. The difference is between the manifestation and the incarnation. So the UAP is hovering above the car itself. I think it was five family members in the vehicle. Only three or four of them saw it, and none of them agreed on what they saw.
Very
Why?
interesting. Yeah.
Why, right? Yeah, okay, now we can go through a series of possibilities. Was the phenomenon really there? I believe it was. Why is it that none of them agreed?
Mm-hmm.
It's because the phenomenon, all right, what happens is when what they're doing is they're consciously looking at the phenomenon and by using the observation effect, collapsing different forms of the same entity.
Mm-hmm. So it's able to be
Trigger it.
perceived
Absolutely. Trigger the
differently.
observer effect. Yes.
Right.
And this touches on the pulse of the phenomenon diversifying its identity on our eyes. And so it gets back to this idea that even when people promote lies in the field, where like early on, I kept dealing with researchers that said, okay, the entirety of the debug phenomenon in the 16th century was literally an entity inhabiting a wine box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the phenomenon incarnated as an entity that, right, haunted a wine box. Why? Because what it's doing is it's playing into roles and thematic elements within the human experience. By observing it, it's tapping into that effect and allowing itself to be collapsed into different forms
Mm-hmm.
of the same proto-intelligence. It's why we have pregnancy, the Dubuk phenomenon, and pregnancy, the incubi phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. So
Same proto-intelligence, it's collapsing, allowing us to collapse different forms of it.
now when you say pregnancy, are you speaking about real physical pregnancy?
Yes, both.
Yeah.
Non-corporeal conception it's kind of a combination. So early on in my work, I always thought, I believed in like Catholic demonology, and I thought, okay, nothing, not there's, I'm against that or anything. I think it goes deeper. Uh, so I always thought, because I was taught this, that there were spiritual conceptions, spiritual pregnancies, and that, that at one point it was the ghost impregnating the female and all that. Well, that's not really what the incubus is. In fact, early scholarship had no way of quantifying what the incubus is. That's why I'm writing my book and trying to articulate this deeper. They didn't even know what they were copulating with.
Hmm.
The church, this blew my mind. The church didn't even know how to charge these people because they try to persecute them, right? And so
Hmm.
during their interrogations, like, who did you have sex with? What was it? Was it fornication? I don't know. Was it a human? Was it bestiality? Was it a beast? Right? Was it a
Hmm.
ghost? And if it was, what would we consider that? Was it necromancy? Or they had no way to quantify it. And so that's where their research basically ended was if
Hmm.
it is a spirit, how can it produce semen?
Hmm.
They did not understand it. Not, I shouldn't, they gave us a lot of research. I'm not negating that,
Hmm.
but that was the extent of the research they gave us was that the incubus itself was some kind of entity that was not only inseminating with fetuses, but they were creating a hybrid.
Hmm.
And here's my problem with that work is that if we don't even know how to articulate what they are, how can we quantify what they're impregnating?
Right. And so where would they be getting the semen? And what is
Yep.
the product? What is the end product of this hybrid?
Absolutely. And that's where possession and pregnancy come into play.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's why, again, the early scholarship debated on whether or not this was a demon. They had no way. Like I said, what is that exactly? And it's the same kind of argument we find ourselves in with respect to religious scholarship. And that's why it plagues me when people are saying, okay, yeah, the fallen angels bred with women. Okay, where did they get the seed? And so they fall into this category of, well, I don't know.
Hmm.
Right. Here's why. Because the data set doesn't match the theory.
Hmm.
In dogmatism, if it's anything, it places handcuffs on our ability to be honest with the data,
Hmm.
right? It's not a
Hmm.
spiritual seed.
Right.
Spirits don't secrete.
Hmm.
What was happening, at least, was that some of these beings are embodied.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that, my friend, is the ultimate key to what we're dealing with. If they're embodied, why do they seek to replicate? And so when you get into this kind of this research, necronetics, the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception, you start to realize that yes, they have bodies. Yes, they're here. They do exist. And what we're looking at literally is not just the body that's replicating, but the consciousness within it, to where that body is dying.
Hmm.
And so, what it does is before it dies, the consciousness within it designs a ritual to where it impregnates the woman with a fetus.
Hmm.
It then hatches a new biological avatar which to possess. That's the only reason. See, what they're dealing with again is the fact that they're trying to understand what a ghost is
Hmm. Hmm.
and how can a ghost inseminate. I think what they're realizing is that you're looking at one aspect of you look at the consciousness, the apparition that's possessing the body, and you're also looking at the body that is being possessed.
Hmm.
And so, is this making sense?
Oh
I'm kind of,
yeah.
I don't want to ramble. Yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah.
why they're having such a hard time articulating it, because on one end, they know what the data set suggests, but on the other end, the theology
Hmm.
refuses to acknowledge it.
Hmm. Well, I think if
And
they acknowledged it, it would be too much of a game changer because, I
oh,
mean, you're talking about an invasion.
yes, absolutely. And a ritual one at that.
Hmm. And an invasion that is a Pandora's box
Yes.
that brings up so many profound things that you need to look at
Oh, yeah. Oh,
about
yeah.
what you think reality is and what you think human manifestation is, right?
Yes, Absolutely. It brings into question whether or not we are avatars
Mm-hmm.
ourselves for another species. And when we're looking at the hybrid, we're looking at the consciousness possessing it. We're looking at an entity that has mastered, or a species of entities that has mastered the ability to abandon their body
Mm-hmm.
in order to possess something else. And throughout history, this is kind of what, and I can't want to go too deep in what I'm putting in the book, but with respect to the homunculus and the golem, we keep seeing an ancient species trying to provide itself an image.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have something that will facilitate my disability of being? I'm tired of being formless and
Mm-hmm.
non-corporeal. But
Mm-hmm.
how can I have a body? And so that's when you start to see the necessity of pregnancy. You
Mm-hmm.
start to see the pathology of possession and pregnancy being in the same case at the same time. So, yeah.
No, no, continue.
uh, well, what we would be dealing with, and I think what we're confusing again, is the body it's inhabiting with the consciousness
Mm-hmm.
inhabiting it, where whatever that entity is, whatever they are, they do seem to be employing ancient ritual magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating.
So this is a primordial force. This is a primordial entity.
I think so. Some of the earliest research I found
Mm-hmm.
regarding what they were is them grooming the consciousness of mediums and psychics.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And what I'm realizing is that the phenomenon has hid from us so successfully throughout history that even in biblical literature, they didn't really know what they were dealing with. They tried,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even in the Witch of Endor, that particular case, um, in linguistics, they call it a hapax legomenon, which means that the language being employed to describe the Witch of Endor was never mentioned again. They didn't
Wow.
know what she was. And the closest rendition, or the closest, I should say, explanation for what she was a Ma'alat Uv, which was a mistress of the image of the dead. I believe wholeheartedly that that's the precursor to the hybrid mother.
Mm. Say more about that, the hybrid mother.
Yes, so the hybrid mother, again, I believe what they're doing is that they're self-replicating within the wombs of hybrid mothers. And so they would be pregnant with the image.
Mm-hmm.
So they had become the mistress of the image of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would speak to an ancient species of practitioner or necromancer that seeds an image as a
Mm-hmm.
fetus.
Mm-hmm. It
And
just
the high, yeah,
it reminds me of these a lot of information that is regarding the elites and the SRA, sexual ritual
yeah,
sacrifices, and the rituals that they do to impregnate a woman to carry a demon possessed
yeah,
entity, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So
And
do
it,
mm,
no,
sorry.
go ahead, go
No, no,
ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I do believe that this touches on that research. It's one of the things that people don't want to talk about. Honestly, I've been on shows where I didn't know the individual I was talking to had been a part of those rituals. And they do treat humans
Mm-hmm.
as just throwaways,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
They fold us up like a cheap suit and then find somebody else, or even to the extent of monitoring. I've touched on this before, monitoring the fertility
Hmm.
of, right? And what I've called the form of fertility. They want to make sure long before they start courting this experience, or they want to make sure that by the time they're ready to replicate, they're able to. In upon conception or even upon insemination, if they discover, and I've had cases like this too, where they're in the house. And specifically, the pathology I've noticed is hovering directly over the experiencer. So she can see.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, but even to the point where they realized, okay, they had a hysterectomy, we can't replicate. So everything they've done till then is it's null and void. The
Hmm.
phenomenon stops and they leave. Um, but I'm going to touch on this and I'm going to extrapolate this in my book.
Hmm. Hmm.
But one of the ways that the Hebrew authors were trying to communicate what they were dealing with is with respect to the word Ob. It's spelled O-B or Uv. And within the context of the ancestral cult, they would employ necromancy. And so you would usually it was designed by a medium. She would communicate with a ghost that was connected to the family that she's talking to. And so the way they described that in Hebrew was the uv. But this is fascinating. If you take the word Abba, which means father,
Hmm.
and you pronounce it the way that it was meant to be pronounced in the context of necromancy, they called it the uva. And so it was an interconnectivity, was basically a play on words where, yeah, the oob that we're in contact with is the father. But that's how, so to even deepen this thread here, that it was the deceased ancestor. It was a revenant, somebody who is returning.
Hmm.
And so in incubi literature, the question was always who the father is,
Hmm.
who the entity is that's returning.
Right.
So much so that in incubi literature, you have incubi victims who think they're copulating with their husbands
Hmm.
until it manifests as the entity itself. Now she's wondering if the child is fathered.
Hmm.
Who's returning here? Is
Hmm.
it my husband or is it the entity?
Hmm.
To go even deeper, uh, they realize that with respect to the father that's returning, or the Uv and Uva in Canaanite literature, they said that number one, the entity is wanting an image to possess. In one of the images is the Uv. So the returning ancestor is going to create an image, it's Necronetics, into to inhabit.
Hmm.
And so within this is fascinating in necromantic literature, in specifically within the context of the Witch of Endor, you have different definitions of the oov. Number one, you have a device that the medium used to amplify the phenomenon or the entity's voice. Some of them would put it underneath their tongue. So that's in a device to amplify communication. The second definition was the material image, you see where I'm going,
Hmm.
of the entity that's returning.
Hmm.
The third definition of Uv is the entity that's returning itself. So what you have here is, again, I don't think we're dealing with a horizontal phenomenon. I think we're dealing with a vertical that's collapsed all of these definitions to a singular species, where the fetus is the medium now. The fetus is the ancestor possessing it. And the fetus, the hybrid, is the materialization, the image of the entity. All of which it seems to be that they're creating their own God in the earth, something that will facilitate their disability of being. And so, what I'm looking at is each and every replication
Hmm.
is them creating an oov
Hmm.
and then possessing it. It's the entity. Now it is a medium,
Hmm.
and it is the biological avatar of the returning entity.
And the lineage connected to that initial incarnation
Yes,
through the body.
absolutely. So, what I'm realizing is that this is performed through ritual magic. And it's no different than the golem. In biblical Hebrew, the first time the word golem is mentioned is with David. And David, the writer, says that you saw me as a golem in my unformed substance, as a fetus, you saw me. And so what all of this, it just appears to me, is that, yeah, each and every time we start to see this species, we have a hard time understanding what they are.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? With incubi literature, with Sinister Minos research. Okay, like what were you even copulating with? They didn't know.
Hmm.
Right? Who are they? Well, it's a Hapax phenomenon. It's we don't really understand this. All we can conceptualize is that they're wanting an image. And this has to do with research into the soul or the nefesh in Hebrew. Some of I guess for the last 50 years, scholars were debating whether or not ancient Israelites even believed in the afterlife,
Hmm.
or at least the disembodiment of the soul and the existence of the soul out of body.
Hmm.
And so what I started looking at is their behavioral patterns. What did some of these deceased people want? And so we have these Curly expedition in University of Chicago sent a group of archaeologists to Turkey, and they excavated a Turkish politician, and he employs the Aramaic word nepes, which the Hebrew comes out with nefesh. You know what he said? This is chilling. He's writing to his family prior to death or disembodiment, and he says, "I want you to make an image of me, and I'll place my soul in that image." Yes. And so what this is the very first time in at least in scholarship that they started to question, number one, we know what he is embodied.
Hmm.
That's Katamua. What will he become out of body? Because whatever that is what we're going to be dealing with.
Hmm.
And so and I don't know if he was mentored into this, right? If there's a
Hmm.
separate species that told him what to do and what to require. But with the embodiment of an image of himself, by the way, those are Uv.
Hmm.
He's now the ancestor that's returning,
Hmm.
but he needs an image to incarnate through. He demanded offerings in altars. So much so, my friend, that people like T. Whitten Davies and Esther Amori and Gideon Barrack, these are scholars, came out and suggested that we may be even confusing the deceased with the ancient gods we were taught existed. This is why, right, in a Katamu inscription, he says, "Oh, by the way, bring me an offering, but also bring an offering for my God." And so what they start to hypothesize is it's possible that these people were leaning on the idea from the Atrasis epic where it says the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god. So he's not referencing a separate entity. He's referencing his liminal existence
Hmm.
as a ghost god.
Hmm. Wow.
Now what we're looking at in the phenomenon is these same entities, whatever they are, uh, demanding altars, right? Wanting sacrifices, and more than anything else, wanting to incarnate again. And all of this is lumped in, or at least lumped underneath the umbrella of necronetics, the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception.
Hmm.
But I think it points to what we're looking at.
Hmm.
What would that entity be if it's out of body at will and embodied at will?
And
Now, it's
replicating
crazy.
throughout the world.
There we go. Absolutely. Yeah, and using archetypes in order to do so,
Hmm.
right? This is why, again, the debug, oh, that's a separate phenomenon. No, what we're doing as experiencers is we're watching and collapsing the entity into various forms. But at its root,
Hmm.
it wants to be worshipped, it
Hmm.
wants sacrifices, and it wants altars. This, my friend, at least from my perspective, is why even the extraterrestrial is wanting the exact same thing, by which hybridism comes into being.
Right. Because it's the same thing that they're doing.
Absolutely. It's mind blowing to me, but that's where I'm at in my research. And people know this. I can't even go into the amount of conversations I've been having lately with people who are huge into ufology.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's, you know, they're building altars to things
Hmm. Well,
and
and
then telling everybody they're extraterrestrial. It's like, not really.
but if you look at the archetypes, you see that it's a way to hide
There we go.
through the archetypes so that you think it's a god or a demigod or,
Mhm.
but it isn't.
Not from my estimation. In whatever they are,
Hmm.
seem to be grooming people by
Hmm.
virtue of abductions.
Hmm.
Like people want to say, okay, it's the byproduct of the scientific method is to take
Hmm.
someone out of their body and have them focus on a sigil.
Hmm.
No, it's not. It's
Hmm.
not. Right?
Right.
Or like with people that are taken out of body and they're taught how to focus their consciousness to fly the craft. No, again, it's not like literally, it's not like, okay, I'm going to teach you science. It's almost pointing people to esotericism,
Hmm.
ritual magic, and then by virtue of their
Hmm.
obedience, by virtue of them submitting to that, then seeding them
Hmm.
with technology. And so that's where I'm at. I don't want to ramble because I always do, but I think that if that to understand the phenomenon in a deeper way, we have to look at the bloody footprints in the snow
Hmm.
because I believe that the alien is just another alias and that its true desire, their true purpose is seen throughout. Forget all of the collapsing archetypes and
Hmm.
incarnations. The
Hmm.
proto-intelligence itself wants what it wants, and
Hmm.
it's been getting it.
Hmm. Well, with the alien abductions, most of the time, what you're looking at is the extraction of DNA,
Yep.
the study of how to hybridize that DNA
Hmm.
with what?
There we go. So, yeah, some of these practices, obviously, we would, at least I did for a long time. I thought, okay, they're novel, they're
Hmm.
modern.
Hmm.
They're not. They're not. It's just another way the phenomenon invades us, if you will.
Hmm.
I've mentioned this in the past where, people are now in the field, they're getting downloads. Well, that's not new.
Hmm.
That's ancient. All
Right.
of this is esotericism. And what I'm afraid of, though, is that it's just another Trojan horse employed by this intelligence,
Hmm.
right? And I want altars, but I'm an alien. And so people thinking, okay, I'm going to buy into this. They build altars and everything. And the phenomenon's back there like, thank you. I'm incarnating.
Hmm.
Thank you. And so right now I'm thinking that, I'm looking at the sigils we're discovering on people
Hmm.
and trying to decipher that. But with respect to the phenomenon grooming practitioners,
Hmm.
it's honoring the evolution of the occult practice.
Hmm.
What's all that about?
Well, the practitioners have the advantage of a lot of people
Mhm.
and, in essence, putting things on those people that will
Yes,
subjugate them.
there we go. There we go. And yes, and so we're looking at modern occultism and saying, okay, if there is a connection between the proto-intelligence mentoring them,
Hmm.
then there's going to be a connection between the phenomenon and the sigils being left.
Hmm.
Well, I think again that the phenomenon is teaching these people
Hmm.
how to perform it
Hmm.
and then honoring it.
Hmm.
Right. So again, I mentioned this in the last show. I'm doing a lot of research into Alston Osman Spar. So he taught that the sigils themselves can be absorbed by the body, activated by the body, then expelled. Who taught him that? Because the phenomenon's doing that to experiencers.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this gets back to Montague Summers' research, where it kind of touches on the idea of, okay, do these beings have bodies? And if they do, why did the secretions look like they came from dead people? Because it's possible that body was dying. That's why it needed to replicate.
So are you saying the semen comes from dead people?
That's one of their
Hmm.
theories. And
Hmm.
I think it kind of all comes into this idea, I should say, of yes, this is the red right, where yeah, when the adept, when the entity,
Hmm.
the man's dying,
Hmm.
if he can still copulate,
Hmm.
even up to the very end of his life, he'll go find about someone to consummate with,
Hmm.
seed them with a fetus, and then at a certain time transfer his consciousness into that fetus. Now, what's so interesting, and this is going to blow your mind, is that, and I'm going to release this now because I haven't talked about it before, but with respect to case studies of ritual magic being employed in the context of hybridization, People are getting reports that are accompanying the pregnancy, where the phenomenon is assuring the health and vitality of the fetus itself. I want to make sure you're taken care
Uh,
of. Yes.
So,
And that's a part of a ritual.
so they're just getting this extra support.
Of course, this is freaky. I know. But again, I think that if we interpret the
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon through the lens of necronetics, things that have never made sense will start to.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that I think that these are rituals that have to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
They have to fulfill their part in order for the ritual to be accurate and to exist. It has to be done. And so now we have to look at apports. Why is it that in some of these abductions, not just abductions, but pregnancies,
Mm-hmm.
where the phenomenon is materializing objects in that house that directly facilitate that fetus? Do you need money? Sure. Here it is.
And
It's a ritual.
it
Yeah.
manifests. Like when you
Yes,
say
yes.
manifests.
I mean collectively,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's in different cultures, like stuff that money that doesn't even belong here from all different time frames. So now we're dealing with it's a whole, I'm still toying with that idea, but my
Mm-hmm.
point here is that one of the rituals, especially the Ultimate Black Mass,
Mm-hmm.
is where after the insemination takes place, after the fetus is hatched within the womb,
Mm-hmm.
the practitioner starts to provide for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, it's facilitating the replication of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in it now, I'll go even deeper. There are cases where the merging of the consciousness with the matter of the avatar doesn't work. In those
Mm-hmm.
cases, specifically one experiencer that worked with Dr. Turner had an unexplained pregnancy. And this is fascinating too. And it was only through memory regression that she started to realize what actually took place. Number one, right? I wasn't supposed to have a kid. My husband and I weren't trying. We weren't even being intimate. But I do now have memories of being, or copulating with an entity in a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have this unexplained pregnancy. Well, this is crazy, but the phenomenon had wiped her mind where she goes and gets surgery or goes to get something done, and they realize, okay, there's fetal material in here. You've been pregnant recently? No, I haven't been pregnant. Oh, well, you okay? Right. Well, whatever. So then through memory regression, she realizes actually I did have the baby,
She had
right?
the.
She had the baby. Now, this is fascinating. This is what I want to get to. But the way the phenomenon treated that fetus through her was like a homunculus. This is weird. Again, another ritual where the way they dispatched of the avatar. I hate to be that
Mm-hmm.
crass.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they treat it, unfortunately. But what she did is she had the baby. It looked different. It was a hybrid. But then she placed it in a glass jar, just like a homunculus, and buried it in the woods. So, yeah, the conception took place. But the merging of the matter into that biological avatar, something failed. And when it fails, it's not taken, it's buried. And so, how many times has that happened with people?
Mm-hmm.
Where, and even Dr. Carla Turner had one of these cases where, um, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last show. I may have, I do a lot of shows, so forgive me if I
Mm-hmm.
did. But they did this with her, as she didn't even know about it.
No memory.
No memory until her son was being abducted. Her son is rather, and so she gets the family together and she's talking to the son, and the husband goes, "Oh, by the way, Carla, don't you remember when you lost that baby?" No, didn't even remember being impregnated. He goes, "Yeah," and one of the friends goes, "Yeah, you told us all that you were pregnant with a fetus and you lost it." So there's a difference between if again, if the consciousness merges with the avatar, the phenomenon will take them both at the same time. If there's a failed transfer of what I call the occult transference aspect, it leaves the fetus.
Interesting.
It's a lot of information. It's a
Yeah,
lot, but
yeah. This is like Invasion of the Body Snatchers
mhm.
in the sense that it's it's looking for hosts
Mhm.
but there's a connection between the host and the consciousness.
Yes. Yes. It's, yes, seeking to be seen. How should I conduct myself in
Hmm.
front of you?
Hmm.
What would you like me to look like?
So, what is the element that is the failure in those examples
Mhm.
then? What is
I don't
the
know.
is it the soul?
I think that they're okay. So the gestation of the hatchling, again, using these terms, because we don't know what they are.
Hmm.
They're not purely human. There's another element in there. Um, and I hate to use that term. I think that the difficulty they're having is that they have a difficult time merging memory with matter.
Hmm.
It's one thing to replicate an image in the body.
Hmm.
I think that at least some of them, this may just be a failure independently.
Hmm.
They, the
Hmm.
entity, not the species. And that they may have failed. In other cases, you may be dealing with a person who's been doing this for thousands of years. Now,
Hmm.
this would answer so many questions, right? Where, our ancestors had a again, difficult time quantifying what a Rephim or Rephim were.
Hmm.
How can that word mean giant
Hmm.
and a phantom at the same time? Because they weren't dealing with just a body
Hmm.
and they weren't dealing with just a ghost. They
Hmm.
were dealing with both of them, one inhabiting the other. And then when that body dies, replicating through another womb. You know, when I first started my journey into this pilgrimage, I had an issue with that because I was always taught growing up that that's when the angels fell. That's not when the angels fell, that's how the angels fell. And if that's how they fell, they must still be falling,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because they're still replicating. And
Right.
so that's when the model of the phenomenon kind of deconstructed in front of me. And I thought there's something much deeper going on here.
Hmm. So, what do you think the angels are? If when we get into discussing this,
Mhm.
and also what do you think the demons are?
So, one of the more ancient arguments, debates that went through not just academia, but in the texts. Even in the Pirkei Avot with Rabbi Eleazar, was a Jewish mystic. One idea is that there was a change in consciousness at the moment of death, which is right where we are, and that some people became Elohim,
Hmm.
gods. And I know that's going to be anathema to people, especially the individuals I grew up with. But I mean, my God, when the Witch of Endor conjures Samuel, he's called an Elohim.
Hmm.
He's called a god.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yet, when other necromancers conjure entities, they're called Rephim, the dead, the
Hmm.
deceased.
Hmm.
Where is the distinction? And that's why Pirkei, in the traditions of the elders and Pirkei Eleazar, he comes out and says, yeah, it seems like there are people that die,
Hmm.
and that by virtue of, and this is some of the dogma, I guess, but by virtue of non-burial or murder or something happened that kept them here. He's describing the disability of being. And for that reason, they're earthbound,
Hmm.
earthborn,
Hmm.
but also earthbound. And one of the, I guess, ancient texts they point back to was Yahweh, God, um, talking to Cain and saying that the blood of your brother cries out from the ground.
Hmm. So he's
It's
bound.
There we go. And now it has to, yeah. So that's one theory, but I think that in order to understand angelology and demonology, we have to go back to the earliest references we can find, and that would be the Atreus epic and the again the distinguishing of the ghost and the god. What is the apparition?
Hmm.
What about the apparition is divine? And so this is why you have qualities like Samuel, like entities, at least his apparition, where he's present.
Hmm.
But there was a difference, right? That's not just an apparition, that's an Elohim. He's
Hmm.
coming out of the earth. Now that what's a Rephaim, though? And so
Hmm.
that's where they get into the Ugaritic ritual bowls. This is information dense,
Hmm.
this show, so I
Hmm.
apologize. But in
No.
the earliest text, in the Ugaritic ritual bowls, you have what's called was it It's magic, but it was designed to ward off entities and negative spirits, and so it's communicating against and with Rapayumi. And this gets back to the Uv.
Mhm, mhm,
These were deceased ancestors.
mhm,
That's the Rapayumi, and then the Hebrew author uses that as a borrowed loan word.
mhm,
Now it's Rephaim. Oh, they're angels and they're fallen angels.
mhm,
That's where it originates. And so that's where it kind of spawns into, well, how does an angel have seed?
mhm.
How do demons have seed?
Right.
Unless we're looking at the Uv, we're looking at deceased ancestors embodying new avatars and
Mhm,
replicating, which is necronetics.
mhm. Have you ever had cases or heard of cases where the women were extremely faithful to God with a
Mhm.
deep, deep spiritual faith, and they were not able to be touched
Uh,
by this
mhm.
necro phenomenon?
Here's a scary thing. If we're dealing with something that has the ability to interrupt consciousness without interrupting our perception of it,
Hmm.
this to kind of finish that goes back to Dr. Carla Turner's question. If the phenomenon is able to do that,
Hmm.
then the only what we do know of the phenomenon only comes from people who can remember it.
Hmm. Interesting.
So I don't have that data set. It's possible they've been doing this to everybody, right? Or
Hmm.
most women, and they don't have access to that part of their mind.
Hmm.
So have I heard of it? I have.
Hmm.
Now, it was in the context of the Virgin Mary.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
What do we do with that? And that's an uncomfortable conversation that I'm still having. I know people that
Hmm.
haven't heard my research, they're going to watch this show and they're going to be like, well, what do we do with that? And I think it's worth discussing.
Well, she had the angel Gabriel
Hmm.
come to her and tell her she would be impregnated. I don't know why that
Yeah.
happened. Got a little
It's
bubble
it's it's
there.
the it's the thumbs up. Hold on, let's see if
Weird.
we can make it happen again. Oh, but
Um,
yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
then this whole discussion, I mean, we need to look at it all, right? We can't,
Hmm.
if it's uncomfortable, we can't just say, well, we don't want to go there, right?
Right.
We,
And we have to be honest with the data set.
mhm. So what do you think in terms of that?
Well, in order for him to be who he was, he would have to come from human lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be. If he's the root of David,
Mm-hmm.
or at least part of the house of David, then now we're talking about literal,
Mm-hmm.
physiological, biological lineage.
Mm-hmm.
If he's tied to that lineage, he has to be tied to that in the sense of a body, in the sense of a seed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the issue with the whole situation was, how could you be pregnant? We've never
Mm-hmm.
been intimate. You've been intimate with something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's really, honestly, it's one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever had because people in my own family have been like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
their thing was that, yeah, one one of the concepts that was introduced to me in the church I used to go to was that God took the seed of Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
what's that sound like, and then inseminated Mary with it.
Mm-hmm.
And and that the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit hovered over
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And it's like, okay, it was tough for me to have these conversations because I
Mm-hmm.
follow that pathology in a completely different context.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do take that to be the case, then what it sounds like is that it's
Mm-hmm.
a war of deity, it's a war of gods, it's the living versus the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And we are all avatars, or at least we're on the battlefield watching it occur.
Mm-hmm. Well, and potentially, we're looking at a takeover,
Yep,
right? If it
we
seeks to
are.
impregnate
Mhm.
women, it
Yes.
sounds to me like it wants to impregnate all women.
if it can,
if it can.
if it can. Yes. And I was never okay with the taking,
Hmm.
obviously, of women.
Hmm.
Things really broke down for me when the same women are having sigils on their bodies.
Right.
It furthered just the deconstructing of the archetype when the sigils were present with the semen.
Hmm.
That is a practitioner.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the problem I'm having is that even the primary sources in the field of literature, each and every time that's what it is, or that's what they believed it was,
Hmm.
you would be dealing with whole pax legomenon, right? Where we don't know what this is.
Hmm. Hmm.
The best we can do is describe it. And then that's when you get into the descriptions of the demonic becoming definitions.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then that's where you get into sisterarchy, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The church, the church, the church
Right.
absolutely knew these hybrid mothers were
Hmm.
doing something wrong. And it's like, but even when they tried to get them to articulate it,
Hmm.
there was no frame of reference. So once again, it's like at every turn, the phenomenon is present with but absent from. All
Hmm.
we have
Hmm.
is what it wants us to see.
And so women who can't have children or who have had a hysterectomy are of no interest.
Most of the time,
Hmm.
and that's not to say that they're not being taken and um, forgive me for the phrase, but being performed upon.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's just that we're seeing too many cases where the three pathologies are present to the extent that it's like this is what they've always been doing.
Have
And it's insane. It
have
really
you
is.
seen in this phenomenon with your research a level of protection that people can invoke that
Mhm.
prevents this phenomenon from being able to do what it wants to do?
So I think that they will materialize to anybody. I think it's pushing back at them that triggers the deconstruction of the archetype. What do
Hmm.
I mean by that? There are friends of mine in the UK that have talked to me, and this is, I can say what I can't say about how when the phenomenon incarnates, not manifests.
Hmm.
What do I mean by that? Let me break that down. Okay. This is what, at least from my perspective, the phenomenology is presenting. Peripheral vision, it's something different.
Hmm.
And then once it is observed by the observer, obviously, what it does is it weaponizes the observer effect and allows us by seeing it
Hmm.
to collapse a different form than what it truly is.
Hmm.
This is why the same entity, the case study I had in India, was seven different lovers,
Hmm.
but it was the same entity.
Hmm.
That's what I mean.
Hmm.
And so deconstructing the archetype literally, and this is very simple, but that's not what we're really fighting for.
Hmm.
Because what we're realizing is by the time it constructs itself,
Hmm.
then it starts to not just be seen by you, okay, that's Uncle Ted or a deceased lover, or whatever. Now it's lit, and this is the manipulation of the emotions. I
Hmm.
want you to believe I am who I am. Now,
Hmm.
Barry Fitzgerald, who one of the best researchers in the world, he says that you have approximately 20 to 30 seconds of observing the archetype before the phenomenon starts to completely commandeer your consciousness. Right. So there's an evolution here.
Hmm.
Peripheral vision, peripheral vision. This is why, again, with Skywatcher and CE5,
Hmm.
what they're seeing is different than what they're recording
Hmm.
because it's the same entity and we're collapsing different forms of it.
Hmm.
And so now, how do we push back? What we're fighting for literally are
Hmm.
seconds, seconds before the phenomenon starts to, okay, reinterpret the data we're observing. So back to my friends. Um, the phenomenon cannot hold its form the entire time.
Hmm.
And so I had that one case where the
Hmm.
experiencer's in bed, her husband comes over, and it was holding its form for I don't know how long. 10, 20 minutes after the copulation, it's still trying to, but as it's to her left, it's not in front. So she turns to look at it, and then it started to move. And so then she realized this is not who it appears to be. It's an archetype. So there's a difference, at least in the phenomenology, from my perspective,
Hmm.
what's seen from here and what's seen dead on. And I think this is why during the copulation that they stare into the eyes. It's not just to impregnate with the image they're staring at. Literally, it's literally to hold their shape
Hmm. Hmm.
so that you won't see what's actually going on. So yeah, it's so what I'm suggesting here is that the you have to catch it early.
Hmm.
That and then if you didn't catch it in time, you're going to be fighting for free will. You're going to
Hmm.
be okay, are these, and now what we're dealing with, it's not just the hitchhiker, it's the hijacker, where you've got to fight for your thoughts,
Hmm.
you've got to fight your behavior because the phenomenon is going to think for you. So my suggestion is if it's that person, test it. I have cases where, is it making sense?
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I've
Okay,
just got so many
literally,
questions.
and it kind of
Yeah.
blends into something else. But even to the point where yeah, like, oh, is it a jacket? Oh, yeah, okay, well, the patch should be over here. It's over here. Or, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
That kind of thing where you see that the learning matrix employed by the phenomenon, it'll skip over this to solidify the other.
Hmm.
And those are the moments we realize that's you're not who you appear to be.
Okay, so in that tiny fraction of time, what you're saying is that that is the moment that you can
Right
invoke
back.
divine protection.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why people like Joe Jordan say they say, okay, this, if
Hmm.
you invoke a deity, they'll flee. I think because yes, we do have a period of time before that learning matrix is
Hmm.
going through stages of evolution in your presence, the interface event. I
Hmm.
want you to see me, right? I want you to project this image of me, but I'm going to do what I want. And so it's just it's really deep, and I'm
Hmm.
trying to simplify it. But there is some evidence, excuse me, where you can fight them off. You can fight back.
Hmm.
But I think it's only within that time frame
Hmm.
because if they commandeer your consciousness, they're going to tell you what to do with your hands. They're going to
Hmm.
tell you you're not going to fight me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's within that frame. This is why, again, where the difference between the manifestation and incarnation, the phenomenon at its earliest incarnation,
Hmm.
that's when you have access.
Hmm.
I am the most me in this event now.
Hmm.
I'm going to push back. And so that's when, yes, um, deities. I've had some success with iron crosses.
Hmm.
I know people dying to ask me that question.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I absolutely agree with that. There's something
mhm,
about iron. I have one over my door.
yep, yep. And it works. I'm just curious about the cases where it doesn't.
The
Uh,
iron is
yeah.
I mean, this is ancient, right? This knowledge is ancient.
Yes, this is ancient. Yeah. So with respect to the cross, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, and that's what makes, curious about that. I'm
Hmm.
still researching that. But with respect to the iron, yes.
Hmm.
Even in folklore, right?
Hmm.
With
Hmm.
the Fae and everything, it's worked. And that's one thing in my research. Like when people would ask me, what do you recommend? I
Hmm.
didn't want my recommendation to be um religious specific, right?
Okay.
Well, just do this. But, I think I wanted to, at least give them something that's cross-cultural and religious. And
Hmm.
that was the introduction of the iron.
Hmm. Now, when the phenomenon starts taking over the person's consciousness and what they interpret as their own thoughts, which are not,
Mhm. Mhm.
have you seen that it comes in tandem with certain things like depression, all of
Yeah.
these symptoms that
Mm.
people experience?
Yes. So when I was growing up, the phenomenon would, and this is very dark.
Hmm.
Now, again, the pathology is different because, I'm not a woman.
Hmm.
right. So it's going to be different for me. But in terms of the manifestation, it was inducing me into looping nightmares where I
Mm,
couldn't wake up. And then when I could wake up, there would be this kind of pulsating, hovering cloud. And then I would begin to interface with whatever this was. Yeah, absolutely. And then I would hear disembodied voices speaking to each other above my head. So I didn't know, obviously, I didn't know what I was experiencing then. But since I've talked to researchers that have somewhat mentored me, and they've experienced that, it's called direct voice phenomenon when it's not even EVP.
mhm,
There's no technology involved. It's interfacing directly with the experiencer, and they're conversing. Some of these researchers have been called by name. We're here. So all of this, especially Necronetics, the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception, it speaks to reality not being real.
mhm,
It speaks to some, and I'm not saying it is a simulation, but some form of simulation
mhm,
where even portions of reality we perceive as real is just the phenomenon hiding from us in plain sight.
mhm.
And what we're witnessing in real time when it does incarnate through wombs and words are just entities on the outside of the framework wanting to be a part of the game.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that this phenomenon is the nature of the Matrix itself?
Um, as a reference to the Matrix,
Hmm.
I'm leaning more towards, first of all, I love the Matrix and I love the
Hmm.
concept. But there's a movie that preceded the Matrix called Dark City.
Hmm.
And I think that's more along the lines of what we're dealing with,
Hmm.
even to the point that one of their quotes was, "We use your dead as vessels," where, right,
Yeah.
where they
Hmm.
constructed reality. And then it's my favorite movie of all time outside of Tombstone.
Do you think that the women who get pregnant, who become pregnant with these hybrids, do you think that they know that they're carrying a child that isn't human? And do you think that when the child is born, that there are certain traits that are very detectable?
Mhm. I'm questioning whether or not the mother will ever truly see that child again
Mm,
because
mm,
right. There seems to be a contrast between the failure of merging their consciousness with it.
mhm, mhm,
They're letting us keep those, not us, but our
mhm,
species,
mhm,
right? To where it's like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything with this.
mhm,
We literally went through the whole ritual, my friend.
mhm,
And then
mhm,
when something failed, which it happens in ritual magic, it fails,
mhm,
then it's on you. We're going to make you do all of this. We're going to make you, and this gets back to again the homunculi
mhm,
connection, where even the after effects, where there was a failure in the transference or the occult transference, even what they're doing with the bodies is
mhm,
ritualistic.
mhm,
So it's not this mindless, unguided process like many people thought, or at least I did at one point.
mhm,
It's not like they're orchestrating all of this. And so what I'm alleging here is that if there is a successful merging of memory and matter in the hatchling, it takes it in, right? You follow me? And what we're left with again is okay, there's evidence of some, there's some birth tissue here. Did you ever, no, I didn't even know.
mhm,
Does it make
mhm,
sense? So yeah,
mhm.
if it's successful, it's the missing fetus syndrome.
What do
If
you
it's not, yep, that's all I had to say about
what do
that.
you think, and where do you think the missing 411 cases fit into this all? The people who literally just vanish
Hmm.
into thin air.
Um, I think that the scary thing is it's not just the bodies, right? It's not like, okay, I mean, it would be disturbing enough, right, if they were just taking people that disappeared.
Mhm,
But they're taking consciousness from people, and the doctors can't explain it. There's no reason for physical death. The body was perfect. There's
mhm.
nothing.
Right.
There's no pulmonary embolisms. There's nothing.
Mhm,
And it's just consciousness is gone. That's what disturbs me. And I think that they are doing that. And we're
Hmm.
finding remnants of the phenomenon there. And the government doesn't want us to talk about it because it's too dark. If we really
Hmm.
knew, we
Hmm.
really truly knew what they were doing, and I think, and how little control.
Hmm.
I mean, we're not just fighting to understand what they're doing, we're fighting to remember what's being done.
Hmm. The few cases of people who have come back,
Yeah.
usually their memory is wiped.
Yes. Sometimes, yes, sometimes they'll, and
They'll remember,
even,
yeah.
right. And even then, it's like, oh, yeah, I was taken by a bear or a
Hmm.
werewolf or something. And you start to see the archetypology in it.
Hmm.
Were
Hmm.
you taken? Yes. Was it by a werewolf or
Hmm.
a robot?
Hmm.
Right. So you see, even then, it's kind of manipulated.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think that that's at least where I'm at in my research, and this
Hmm.
is going to be, uh, I think I have maybe 3 or 4 more interviews for the year, and then I'm going to kind of shut it down. I usually do during the end of the season because I get into
Right.
football and stuff, and I kind of just,
Well, and you're writing your book.
yep.
Have you noticed that there's an increase in electromagnetic energy when the
Mhm.
phenomenon shows itself?
Yes. And I believe that's why our ancestors would position their rituals underneath the stars
Hmm.
in specific areas in this world.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, to hack into that, right? To
Hmm.
hack
Hmm.
into these frequencies. Matter of fact, um, some of the oldest literature we have about Sheol before it
Hmm.
became hell, the
Hmm.
land of the dead, was that Sheol was not just under the ground, but it was where the phenomenon materialized the most. And so early practitioners would literally position themselves exactly where they're positioning themselves today, underneath the cosmology of stars, specifically deserts. Why? And they wrote that as Sheol. Oh, that's Sheol.
Hmm.
Why? Because that's where the phenomenon was the most.
Hmm. Interesting.
Fascinating,
And
right?
why? Why there though?
There we go. I think that, yeah, they're weaponizing frequencies,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
hack and to be able to, if not to manifest the archetype, at least just hang out.
Hmm.
But a lot of this is the phenomenon wanting to be seen.
Hmm.
And this is the fear that I have, if I may, that when we have the CE5 movement,
Hmm.
that we are under the impression, not us, but people are under the impression that they're saying their name and then the phenomenon's coming down. No, I think the phenomenon's saying their name.
Hmm. So you think the phenomenon is saying their name?
Yes, come out and witness me. And then when you witness me, I'll incarnate as an archetype.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
have to be seen to do it.
Hmm. What about ectoplasm?
So ectoplasm is an interesting thing. A long, long time ago, there was a minister that came through church, and his name was John Fitzhuber. And this was like kind of my very first experience with the supernatural,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and he would talk about doing deliverances. And so he was a missionary's kid. So he grew up, I think it was in Arkansas or something, until 14, and
Hmm.
then moved to Africa. And so from 14 to 25 or something, he's ministering in Africa and being taught spiritual warfare
Hmm.
by Africans. And they were amazing.
Hmm.
Amazing. They knew what they were
Hmm.
talking about. And they handed him some principles. And so, he would come and preach at our church and everything. And one of these services, he said that he was, this blew my mind, walking next to a young woman at a revival. And, as he walked by, it triggered incarnation and in fluent French, which she didn't know. It commandeered her body and spoke directly to Jonathan. Hello, Jonathan, in French, of course. Do you remember me? And Jonathan, now this guy, you want to talk about a sage and a mage.
Hmm.
This dude fast 30, 40 days. I mean, when he walked into a room, you knew there is something supernatural here. And so he looked right back at it and spoke back in French. I do remember you. I cast you out of a man at a crusade 10 years ago. And it was on. It was on. So, anyways, Yeah, right. Every time I talk about that story, I get chills because it's like, I mean, this guy was bad to the bone, and it wasn't like Benny Hinn and this fake stuff. It
Yeah.
was literally like this guy. I mean, oh, it's crazy. But anyways, to your point, he told a story about, um, I think he laid hands on that girl or prayed for her, did something, one of his tradition, and she began to regurgitate a substance. And this is what really angers me about not just the phenomenon, but specifically demonology, because the phenomenon is also blending into religion, right? Well, this is
Hmm.
how it's supposed to be done. It's not supposed to be done like that at all,
Hmm.
right? It's just people that want to sell t-shirts, get on TBN and say a bunch of stuff. And oh my God, right? We
Hmm.
live in a 30,000 square foot house and it's money, money, money.
Hmm.
That's not the real deliverance. That's not
Hmm.
the real phenomenon.
Hmm.
So he's doing this, he's doing his tradition, and she regurgitates this substance, and people are like, "We're gonna get a bucket." He said, "No bucket." He pulls out his handkerchief, cough it up. So she coughs into this napkin, and he said, "Now here's how you know it's supernatural. If it's just somebody faking it, it will still be there when you open the napkin up."
Hmm.
Yeah, he said, so in these specific cases, it's supernatural. The entity it coughs it up. It's nowhere to be found afterwards.
Hmm.
That's fascinating.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Do you think that because you're working on this phenomenon and you're revealing it,
Mhm.
that it has now a particular interest in you?
There are some things that I'm going to come forward with about my upbringing,
Hmm.
specifically what the phenomenon told me, or it may be the phenomenon.
Hmm.
But I went through a period of deep depression
Hmm.
when I was in that haunted house.
Hmm.
And there were tons of times where it's going to be very vulnerable,
Hmm.
where suicide was there.
Hmm.
In fact, in the looping nightmares, that's what was taking place. Somebody was over and over and over again. Then I would wake up
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, oh my God. And I had a nightmare where an entity came to me and told me, you will die when you turn 50. Some of the stuff I've forgotten, and my mother, who I confided in at that time, she's come forward. Like one time she told me about how I woke them up in the middle of the night because a witch had materialized at my door. I forgot all about that. And yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I tell you that, yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, you
Hmm.
said that a witch had materialized at your door and just watched you. So there's stuff that happened to me that I still don't remember, but I do remember that was
Hmm.
that, you're going to die when you turn 50. And so I think the phenomenon's always known that I'll be doing this research. But what's so funny to me is that's kind of a similar threat that I received not too long ago,
Hmm.
right? When you die, we're going to be waiting for you. The
Hmm.
implication is that we know when you're going to die, and it's like, well, okay, fine, but
Hmm.
still going to do
Hmm.
what I'm doing.
To me, that seems like an implantation into your consciousness and subconsciousness
Yeah.
so that it's relying on you believing
Mhm.
it and perhaps even manifesting it.
Yes, and in my lowest moments doing this research,
Hmm.
and I've been in houses where they've cut up the carpet before I got there, and I had no context, I had no idea a murder had taken place, and I've been in homes like that
Hmm.
where the family is like, listen, the murderer was a female, but when she's stabbing us, a male guttural voice is coming out of her. Her mouth's not moving, but it's coming out of her. I've been in those
Yeah,
situations, and yet what I felt in those moments is still nothing like what I feel when I get too close to the research.
really.
Because yeah, what I feel, I stop being a 36-year-old man and I turn into that 8-year-old boy who is wondering, like, literally, like there's something here, and it's it's loneliness. And I've articulated this to other researchers, and it's not like it's existential loneliness where I don't even know if I should be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it made me feel like. Whenever the phenomena would materialize in my room, it would make me feel like I was just a speck.
Mm-hmm.
It would envelop me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like when I get too deep in the research, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
people think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's, no, it's existential dread. It's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
I
that's
think
just,
I think that when you say existential loneliness, I think that is the key.
yep. And it's a lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
lie that the phenomenon can get you to believe it. And this gets back into, again, my earliest experiences was that by believing in it, I empowered it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In this interface event, these interface events where when the phenomenon manifests,
Mm-hmm.
it will often try to think for you without you knowing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as long as it can convince you that
Mm-hmm.
was your thought, then you'll do exactly what it wants you to do. I think it was David Jacobs had one of these cases where he was dealing with an abductee, and she was asking, like, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What can I do about them taking me? And he's like, well, I think it would, and if I'm correct, this is what happened. I know the camera happened. I think it was like handcuff yourself to the bed,
Yes.
right? Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Turn the camera
Yep.
on, handcuff yourself to the bed, and then right, and then afterwards, she's like, they abducted me, and I don't know how. I said, okay, let's go back and look at the camera and look at the
Mm-hmm.
film. Sure enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unchange herself from the bed, goes over to the camera and turns it off. That's when the phenomenon thinks for you. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that even, especially with respect to when the phenomenon comes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times in the nighttime, it's because we cannot, this gets back to the dream demon, my friend. We cannot discern reality from the simulation, from the archetype.
Mm-hmm.
That's why throughout demonology, these victims would call it a dream demon.
Right.
Not that
Right.
the demon was the dream.
Mm-hmm.
It was the one inducing the dreamlike state
Mm-hmm.
and making us, this is incredible. We would have, what is it? Uninformed consent.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So do you think there are real demons? Or do you think that the demonic principalities are a product of this?
There does seem to be an hierarchy, and that took me a long time, I guess, to come to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with respect to the dead and their images,
Mm-hmm.
that it seems like another species. Now, this could open the door
Mm-hmm.
towards, another aspect of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always been focused on this pathology and this
Mm-hmm.
work. But in real time, we're witnessing people in the field that are being mentored by entities.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the sigil. What can you do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And getting quote unquote downloads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my theory and what Necronetics proposes is that some of these entities were formerly human and that they were also given downloads to perform their rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And then upon death, they were taught.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this, like, okay, you know how strange it would be if someone's like, oh my God, I don't even know what death is, but when I die, I'm going to be possessing an image of myself. Where did they get that concept from?
Exactly.
Right? Something mentored them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
into this esoteric tradition. And I got chills. All right. I think that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where, yeah, they're picking specific people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why, yeah, but that's what appears to be happening. And I think that we see that most glaringly
Mm-hmm.
in what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a sacrifice. Give me an altar.
Mm-hmm.
I want an image to possess.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why George Adamski,
Mm-hmm.
same thing. Build me an altar. And I got to tell you this, like I said, I've been in contact with other people in ufology that are huge,
Mm-hmm.
huge. And they're realizing that this is a front. The
Mm-hmm.
same people that are telling us they're extraterrestrial are building altars.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And it seems like it's utilizing blood as a means by which to manifest in some way.
Yes, absolutely. And there's one quote that goes back to a church father that says, "The devil is made from man's ruins."
Mm-hmm.
Another version of that is, "The devil is made from God's ruins," where in
Mm-hmm.
order to further their existence, they have to take secretions and excretions. I
This
don't know what it
reminds
all means.
that I mean, this reminds me of ancient Babylonia and the
Hmm.
dark magician cults, the secret
Yep.
dark magician cults that were really prevalent,
Oh, yeah.
going back thousands of years, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm doing some research now into what's called the Atimu or Atumu, which was another concept, or I guess attempt at understanding what
Mm-hmm.
these things were. They really didn't know, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that
Mm-hmm.
points us in the direction of what would consciousness be outside of body for a specific time, is because it can't just be some of the apparitions we're witnessing being projected from orbs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're talking about, like there's a researcher named David Tanner, and he's been dead now for hundreds of years, I think, but or Adam Tanner rather, and he talks about the manifestation of a true ghost god,
Mm-hmm.
where you had where the soul consciousness itself has a texture to it,
Mm-hmm.
where the materialization of the entity is predicated on memory of its own body.
Interesting.
And that would, these all these people, well, if it's an apparition, we don't ever see dead people. Well, what kind of memory
Mm-hmm.
wants to be naked?
Mm-hmm. So when we have experiences with ghosts, what are we experiencing?
There we go. I think some of this is tied to, a recurring haunting,
Mm-hmm.
where this goes back to where consciousness is stained into that environment, and you keep
Mm-hmm.
seeing. Now, this is something I'm entertaining. I'm not really confident in it, but we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
this recurring entity.
Mm-hmm.
I've had cases where even with poltergeist, trickster
Mm-hmm.
archetypes, where what we originally thought was just a poltergeist or a resident haunting
Mm-hmm.
was literally, until it captured your attention,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then now it's something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It's the archetype, and then once it gets you into interfacing with it,
Mm-hmm.
its real pathology manifests.
So how do you distinguish the difference between something that is a real phenomenon versus
Hmm.
this invader phenomenon?
Okay. The evidence suggests that the phenomenon wants to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would kind of bait us with the idea of, do you want to witness the supernatural,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I have to be careful, because soon I'll be doing this research,
Mm-hmm.
not because I'm trying to like entertain them. I'm wanting to look at the methodology behind
Mm-hmm.
all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me says, don't look.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because hold on, because my friend, by the time we see them, it's too
Mm-hmm.
late.
Mm-hmm. So for those that didn't look though,
Yeah.
and they were born into just crazy amount of phenomenon,
Mhm.
there's there's no presupposition to this.
Right, right. This is also fascinating because it's like the phenomenon doesn't know what wave to collapse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that with my own research, right? It's and this is why, like it doesn't know what it wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's encouraging to me, because now
Mm-hmm.
we're hacking the hackers. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the case study of the experiencer, where the entity is appearing again. It's different
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
until you're perceiving it, and now it's the archetype of her favorite cartoon character.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
once it had no other archetypes, like a program, it
Mm-hmm.
could not update.
Mm-hmm.
That's so encouraging in the research. It had no,
Yeah.
and so my approach has been, um, and this is just me, any image you give me, I'm not going to believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would you say are the best methods to protect yourself?
Um, don't contact it.
Hmm.
And gets back to the Collins Elite research, where some really weird recommendations came from their work, and it was don't believe in them,
Hmm.
don't look.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the purposes of the CE5 movement
Hmm.
is to get people to observe.
Hmm.
And by being seen,
Hmm.
the phenomenon then seeds us with different archetypes.
Hmm.
And this is incredible. Again, I believe 100%.
Hmm.
This is why the case study that I'm working on still, one of Dr. Turner's old case studies, it was the mother, but she's now deceased, so I'm working with the son, where what the husband and the son saw manifesting in the room was different than what the experiencer witnessed.
Hmm.
The phenomenon, right? The phenomenon seems to be able to literally trigger the observer effect
Right.
at will, to where what happened was they were collapsing a different version
Hmm.
of the phenomenon than the experiencer was.
Hmm.
What this leads me to believe is that not only that they may not be aliens,
Hmm.
that these archetypes may not even exist,
Hmm.
in that whatever is going on behind the veil can only be interpreted
Hmm.
by what they're leaving on the body, which
Hmm.
is pretty much where we started.
Right. AKA, we have no idea what it actually is because it hides itself via
Right.
all of these
Right.
interfacing
Yep.
manifestations.
Correct. Correct. And so then it would be like if you're a criminal pathologist, I guess, going into a murder and saying,
Hmm.
okay, it seems to be like it has many aliases,
Hmm.
right? But the ritual
Hmm.
is the exact same. The symbols
Hmm.
are the same.
Hmm.
And I think that's really where the research is.
Hmm.
And so, what I'm not suggesting is that these are different pathologies,
Hmm.
right? I'm just suggesting that the archetypes it's manifesting
Hmm.
may not exist at all. This may be exactly why
Hmm.
um, we have orbs producing different images that
Hmm.
we're supposed to believe all exist in their own respective fields,
Hmm.
or no, they don't. And it's just the phenomenon.
Or look at the drones and the orbs that everybody's been witnessing
Yeah.
lately.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you one of those things that freaked me out was I forget who it was. I have to go look back at it. But anyways, um he was talking, this researcher was talking about the drone flap in Jersey, and he said that one of his friends, she is an FBI agent, and she said one of these drones was hovering over her home. Again, when people said, okay, because I heard this too, well, yeah, it's talking FBI agent. This is one of those cases. And this researcher asked her, like, well, what did you experience? She goes, it was the weirdest sensation. Because even though we could hear it,
Hmm.
she's like, it sounded like a helicopter. But we knew, she goes, I've been in helicopters all my life, especially in the field. She said, I knew that if that helicopter, that drone, was directly over top of us, we would feel a reverberation in the home.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
The cognitive dissonance between what she heard and what she felt was present. And she said that made me believe that it was projecting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That freaks me out.
Yeah. So it's projecting it. Also, if you look at it on the large scale of all these people witnessing these orbs and these drones, there's
Mhm.
a collective consciousness interface thing happening.
Yes. Yes, it's conforming itself.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there is footage, and I've seen some of this where it wasn't a drone, but it was essentially an orb of light. I think I told you this last time, where it's one shape this way when it comes into frame, and then by the time it has collected itself an archetype to inhabit, now it's a plane.
Hmm.
And I
Exactly.
think that's not good.
Hmm. Hmm. So where do you think humanity is at this present time in this, which it sounds like an invasion that has been happening for thousands of years in order for this thing to have a body.
Yes, it's possible that either we are evolving
Hmm.
too fast, and as Dr. Turner said, we're starting to wake up,
Hmm.
and because of that, the phenomenon has to perform measures. And we've seen that, right? If you get too
Yeah.
close, it'll take you out. And it's very probable that in our evolution, and not just but consciousness,
Hmm.
we're realizing that this is more like a simulation,
Hmm.
in that it's afraid that if we start to understand that, we're going to seek to get out of it.
Hmm.
And that is, I believe, where the government stands. We've got to evolve our consciousness to understand what's going on.
Hmm. Yeah, and the government is protecting it essentially.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm still curious about all of that. I don't
Hmm.
think that, obviously, I know that they know more than us,
Hmm.
in that I've had conversations with people that they have clearances, but they couldn't tell me, but they
Hmm.
would just nudge me. And it was kind of like we're being manipulated,
Hmm.
and we're just now understanding how.
Hmm.
And yet, because of that, where does that put us in relation to the others? Does that
Hmm.
make us a threat?
Hmm.
I don't
I
know.
I
So
think
it's
so. Because
yeah,
in this equation, right, there is, as we're waking up, because matter is not fixed,
yeah,
this implies that we can alter matter and
hmm,
reality, right? So I think we are a huge threat. For this to have changed itself to be what it is
hmm,
because of us.
yes,
And
yes.
it's always trying to be ahead of us so that it can stop our.
There we go. Right, right. Absolutely. And I've always questioned that, like how is it always two steps ahead of us?
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of that has to do with the archetype, right? And the observer effect.
Right.
They're always, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so it's like, well, it gets back to the cause elite, What do we do? Don't believe in them.
Hmm. Do you think there's an AI element to this?
The learning matrix implies that.
Hmm.
I think that not just that, but what they're doing, like their pathology,
Hmm.
merging memory with matter is something they've done successfully and unsuccessfully throughout history.
Hmm.
Even some of the necromantic rituals
Hmm.
employed thousands of years ago that were pretty successful.
Hmm.
It does imply a species that, again, has hacked the matrix and is helping other people hack it too.
Hmm.
But in order to get them and help them and mentor them, there are certain exchanges happening of currency, and not in a sense of money, but giving an altar.
Hmm. Hmm.
And these beings want to be worshipped.
Hmm.
And it's very convoluted. And even me doing my best to articulate it, and I'm some days I do good, some other days I don't do as good. But I think we're getting closer
Hmm.
to understanding our role in the phenomenon.
Ancient Greek gods, right? Unless they worship
Yes,
us, we cease to exist.
there we go. And again, that's a direct correlation with the images of the dead and necromancy. They wanted the same things.
Hmm.
So I did a show a long time ago, not a long time ago. I did that. Somebody was like, "Well, that's not what the scholars say." That is what the scholars say. But I
Hmm.
think a lot of people, right, they'll watch me and be like, "Well, hey, I'll say this and say that." It's like, well, I have the writings, right?
Hmm.
And that's one of the oldest arguments that
Hmm.
that our scholars had was like, well, there's a weird thing here.
Hmm.
It's like Katamua. I want you to give me an offering and give my God an offering.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's just really weird. Here's the weirdest thing about it, to be just very transparent, is that at the end of the day,
Hmm.
I want to know what matters to them and why it matters,
Hmm. Right.
hoping that if I do understand that, it would help me further understand their nature.
Hmm.
And that's the weirdest aspect of it all.
Hmm.
What does worship do to you?
Right. Why do you need it so bad?
Yeah. And why are you willing
Yeah.
to just, to give me anything if I
Hmm.
give it back to you? That's,
Hmm.
it's strange.
Hmm. And the sigils that you've seen, you say that they all look similar.
Some of them, yeah.
So are those sigils going back to ancient civilizations, Babylonian sigils?
Mhm.
Is there a correlation to anything historically with these
Absolutely,
sigils?
absolutely. So some of them are Theban, which is again an alphabet created by witches in the medieval periods or period. That's something that we're seeing. The others, this gets back to a Brahmin the Mage, which is fascinating, which Bromlin came in contact with a person that was being acted upon, and some of these same sigils were being witnessed. And Bromlin the Mage didn't touch it. He just, I don't want anything to do with this. And he called it angel magic.
Hmm. Okay.
Angel magic. And so a lot of these are Theban. And I think that our government
Mm.
knows that because can we contextualize it as language? Well, yeah, but it's not one, right, that we just converse with. It's
Hmm.
literally an occult language. It's esoteric in nature.
Hmm.
Um, but there does seem to be an hierarchy of occultism
Hmm.
where the phenomenon, this is crazy, with it was Montague Summers research, where what we would call the abduction phenomenon was harvesting the same secretions
Hmm.
that we're finding in grimoires,
Hmm.
right? Where it is blood. Why? Because that's what they need to perform their magic and their rituals.
Hmm.
It is semen. Why is that? Because that's what they need to use in their rituals.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, it is the fetus. Well, that's what they're using in rituals. So, and that's what, again, that people want this to be purely nuts and bolts. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, but what if it's both,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And we're dealing with a species that were formerly human. And what they've done is they're doing exactly what we're doing now. The only difference is they've self-replicated. Their
Hmm.
science is
Hmm.
going to be thousands of years. Why?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? So, but anyways, I hope this made
Hmm.
sense. And I know I
Oh
tend to
yeah.
ramble.
So this takes me also to the, let's just say, the Illuminati families or the elite
Mhm,
families, right? Who are utilizing sigils, architecture. They're forming and forging a lot of this in like our everyday places,
mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So there's an element about this to me that these hidden hands
right.
are doing as these lineages, and
Yes,
their job is to do this.
absolutely. I'll give you a chilling case study that was given to me, and I had no idea it even existed. But there is an occult mechanism in Jeffrey Epstein's victimology.
Mhm.
There was a reason why there were things happening twofold. Number one, that he was trying to replicate himself, he was trying to clone his body. Number two, on Epstein Island, he had a ritual bath, right? And so you start to see this. Matter of fact, one of the experiencers, I believe, I don't want to, Julia Bryant,
Mhm.
I think that's her. Um, but she did an interview, and the guy that interviewed her messaged me, was like, Nathaniel, we got to talk. He said, because Juliet Bryant, I think it is because during the assaults,
Mhm.
he demonstrated a unique pathology. And I'm still questioning this. It's fascinating, but he stared directly into her eyes, and there was, I don't think it's literally shape-shifting. I
Mhm.
think, again, he was weaponizing the observer effect,
Mhm.
where she caught it slipping, and it was an actual ritual. Now, people are going to say, okay, Nathaniel, you're losing your mind. Okay, fine. I don't care. My point, though, is that independent of my research,
Hmm.
what she started to realize was, yeah, there's a ritual here.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that as evil and unspeakable as his acts were, that there was a Kabbalistic nuance to it, to where, yeah,
Hmm.
these people were victims,
Hmm.
but there was a deeper victimology present to where he was choosing, again, his own bloodline,
Hmm. His own bloodline.
his own bloodline. And that was her point, was that he was trying to clone a version of himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's one aspect of it that, and that's
Yeah.
my biggest fear is I do all this, and then one day one of these things shows up, and it's like, well, what then, Nathaniel? And it's like, oh, well, you know what I mean? But anyways, that's where I'm at with my research,
Right.
and I'm pushing forward,
Hmm.
and some days I have to take a break, and then
Yeah.
go back to work later.
No, I think the breaks are really important, especially when you're dealing with this,
Oh yeah.
because it's yeah, and this is where the protection, the divine protection has to be
Hmm.
deeply in place because this thing is conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be around us at all times, and we've only interacted with the incarnation.
And it may not have the limitations of time the way we do. So
Right.
it can operate
We're,
outside of time.
we're still learning. We are.
Yeah.
We're groping in the darkness, but at least we know it's dark.
Hmm.
I mean, that's at least some concept of what's going on.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's essentially the contextual framework for necronetics, the ritual doctrine for non-corporeal conception.
Hmm. Do you want to leave any last comments before we finish the video to everyone, and maybe just on a hopeful matter or on a hopeful,
Mhm.
uh, because when you're dealing with this, I want to be
Mhm.
able to give also something that is positive for
Mhm.
people because I don't want them to feel like they're just sitting
Right.
ducks.
I okay, to answer that, yeah, I don't want them to feel hopeless either. And I don't feel hopeless.
Hmm.
I'm doing the research,
Hmm.
at least some of it with other people, of course. But I think that we are in the midst of profound evolution.
Hmm.
And it's because of that that we're going to pick up things that we can use.
Hmm.
And so I've already provided some. The biggest, I'm telling you, the biggest thing to do is to see beyond the archetypes.
Hmm.
When you force it,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
literally, like I said, the learning matrix
Yeah.
sometimes glitches
Yeah.
and it's forced to reveal itself. It's at that moment
Hmm.
that you have literally bent their will.
Hmm.
And then you start to see this is kind of more of a mental thing.
Hmm.
And right.
Right. Right.
So yeah, my thing is this, like I said, we're evolving. Not okay. The phenomenon was evolving according to our awareness. Now
Hmm.
we're evolving according to our awareness.
Right.
And
Hmm.
we're becoming more aware, my friend.
And it's inevitable that we're going to get to the point where I think it cannot mislead us.
Right.
It cannot
Right.
disguise itself.
That's huge.
And at that point, I think it is afraid of its death.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
There's nothing to replicate through. There's no more
hmm.
unlocked doors and open windows,
Hmm.
right? It's like
Hmm.
if they were to manifest to me, I would literally not believe in anything I
Hmm.
saw.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
but yeah, okay. So my last thing, I will tell people that number one, you're not alone in this, right? No matter how you feel, and that we're starting to see beyond the veil.
Hmm.
And I think that in the next decade, it's not just we're seeing beyond the veil, but I can tell you where the research is now, where once we fight off them thinking for us, there's a lot more liberty there. There's a lot more freedom.
Hmm.
And so even though we may only be fighting to understand the first 30 seconds,
Hmm.
once we get beyond that, then we start to have more of an autonomy. And that will be game changing for us.
Hmm. I think we're getting close to that.
Yeah, we are. We are.
Nathaniel,
Ah,
wow,
thank you.
amazing. Your research is absolutely amazing. And I feel
Thank
your
you.
research is a game changer to reality. And one of the most important revelations that unravels the entire story of what we think we have lived.
It's deep. Thank you. It's been again existential loneliness. It's been profoundly alienating for me,
Hmm.
like I and there are days when I get down, people will
Hmm.
mess me, all right? I'm like, I'm doing all right, just hanging in there,
Hmm.
it's just been one of those days.
Hmm.
And then it's what I've noticed though is as the deeper the valley, the taller the mountain,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I'm always this close from another piece to the puzzle
Yeah.
that makes all of the other trauma in my life make sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but I appreciate part two, and I hope it added value to your pilgrimage. Thank you for having me back on.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Yeah, truly, an honor.
Thank
Truly.
you.
I want to thank everyone for being here. And yeah, I am looking forward to your book, and I know everyone else's. So I hope that will be at some point in the near future.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm excited
And
about
when it gets published, will you let me know so that I can let
it.
everyone know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then we'll be able to
Do part three?
we'll do part three, and I'll go into the connection of the Oov and the returning father who is
Mm-hmm.
building the son in order to incarnate again.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really wild stuff. But absolutely. I'm looking forward to
Okay,
it.
can't wait. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you later.